Chapter 15. Continuing Conspiracies. And the Lord said unto me, A conspiracy is found among the men of Judah, and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Jer. 11:9. The Jewish commonwealth was divided into districts, i.e., Galilee, Judea, etc. Each of them had their own courts, legislatures, and judges, and was presided over by a high priest, which explains why there were so many high priests spoken of in the New Testament. Each district was subdivided into smaller divisions, presided over by an officiating priest. If the heads of government became corrupt, then the whole body politic could also follow on down to the citizens. A conspiracy that worked its way into religious or political systems could soon corrupt the whole body and cause it to commit crimes in the name of justice and law. On the other hand, an honest government could improve the lives of the governed, but sadly, this situation was very rare. A conspiracy that worked its way into a government could result in the destruction of a nation, and it was so with many nations, including the Jewish nation. The crucifixion of Christ was not an accident, mistaken identity, or a momentary outburst of a mob. The plot had been carefully planned, and the conspiracy was accomplished after a long series of gatherings behind closed doors. The entire Jewish nation did not come out in opposition against Jesus. Many Jews actually became Christians themselves, several of whom were persecuted and killed by their own people. It all started with just a small group of conspirators who secretly plotted to get rid of Christ. They tried to convince the rest of the people that he was a fraud, a false prophet, and that he had a devil and would destroy their temple and their nation. They agitated the people, created disruption and division, and then blamed him. It was the same old plan that other corrupt conspirators had devised. Who had the most to gain from Christ's death? Who had the strongest motive? Who held the secret meetings to get rid of Jesus and questioned and entrapped him? Who stood before the people making false charges against him? Who hired the lawyers to charge him with breaking the law? It was always the Jewish high priests, elders, and scribes, many of whom were members of the Sanhedrin, and were chosen from among the Pharisees and Sadducees. Though Jesus spoke of and to them frequently, it was never in a complimentary manner, but rather as the source of his afflictions. So let's consider the definitions of these terms. High priests. Jesus Christ is the great high priest, of whom all the others were prefigures. The office was usually a lifetime calling, and, when rightly appointed, was by revelation from God, as was Aaron. During the Maccabean period, the high priest was also political head of the nation. After this family was overthrown, high priests were inappropriately appointed and deposed at pleasure by Herod and the Romans alike. The office was filled by 28 different men between 37 BC and AD 68. Since the latter year, the office has ceased to exist among the Jews, but they were in apostasy long before that time. The office was hereditary and came through the firstborn among the family of Aaron, Aaron himself being the first high priest of the Aaronic order. The high priest was privileged to use the Urim and Thummim. King James Bible, LDSPRTG, 1979, pages 702 to 703. Elders, an official title among the Hebrews and the surrounding nations, had reference to various offices. The earliest notice of the elders acting in concert as a political body is at the time of the Exodus. They were representatives of the people, so much so that elders and people are occasionally used as equivalent terms. Their authority was undefined and extended to all matters concerning the public weal. Smith's Dictionary of the Bible, page 163. Scribes. In the days of the Hebrew monarchy, this was the title of a court official, a secretary of state. After the captivity, we find the title given to Ezra and to others who acted as teachers of the law. Scribes are frequently mentioned in the NT, being sometimes called lawyers. It was their business to develop the law in detail and apply it to the circumstances of their time, hence grew up the oral or traditional law side by side with the written law. They taught either in houses of instruction or in the temple courts, their pupils sitting on the ground. They formed an influential part in the Supreme Court of the Sanhedrin. Rabbi, my master, was the title usually given them. As a rule, they were Pharisees, though there were also Sadducean scribes. King James Bible, LDSPRTG, 1979, page 770. Pharisees, a religious party among the Jews. The name denotes separatists. They prided themselves on their strict observance of the law and on the care with which they avoided contact with things Gentile. Their belief included the doctrine of immortality and resurrection of the body, and the existence of angels and spirits. They upheld the authority of oral tradition as of equal value with the written law. The tendency of their teaching was to reduce religion to the observance of a multiplicity of ceremonial rules and to encourage self-sufficiency and spiritual pride. They were a major obstacle to the reception of Christ and the gospel by the Jewish people. Ibid, page 750. Sadducees. A party or caste among the Jews. The name is probably derived from Zadok, the high priest in Solomon's time. The party consisted of old high priestly families who came to the front during the Maccabean War. They formed the Jewish aristocracy and were powerful though quite small in numbers. In their treatment of religious questions, they held to the letter of the Mosaic revelation and denied the authority of ancient tradition. They taught complete freedom of the will in moral action. They were opposed to the Pharisees as to the belief in angels and spirits. They refused also to accept the doctrine of immortality as a necessary part of the Jewish faith. It was through their influence that Greek culture spread in Israel. Their opposition to our Lord was the result of his action in cleansing the temple, which they regarded as an infringement of their rights. They opposed the work of the apostles because they preached the resurrection. Ibid, page 767. The Sanhedrin. Though Jesus did not comment on the Sanhedrin as a body itself, he did speak of its members. It is defined as the Jewish Senate and the highest native court in both civil and ecclesiastical matters. Under the presidency of the high priest, it regulated the whole internal affairs of the Jewish nation. It consisted of 71 members and had an aristocratic character, being drawn from the three classes of chief priests, scribes, and elders. In the time of the Lord, the Pharisees had the predominating influence upon it, but there were Sadducean elements. Ibid, page 769. The power and jurisdiction of this council extended far beyond the walls of Jerusalem, or even the bounds of Palestine. Saul, who was once a member of this council, saw prisoners by power of this body, even to the regions of Damascus. See Acts 9:1-2. When the apostles were imprisoned after the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, this Sanhedrin council was still active and continued to act upon the disciples of Christ. See Acts 5:18-21. The following scriptures will portray some of the negative actions and conspiracies taken by members of the Sanhedrin against Christ. But the chief priests consulted that they might put Lazarus also to death, because that by reason of him many of the Jews went away and believed on Jesus. John 12:10-11. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers also many believed on him, but because of the Pharisees they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue, for they loved the praise of men more than the praise of God. John 12:42-43. And when the chief priests and scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying in the temple, and saying Hosanna to the Son of David, they were sore displeased. Matt 21:15. And when he was come into the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came unto him. Jesus saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that the publicans and the harlots go into the kingdom of God before you. Matt 21:23-31. Then went the Pharisees, and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk. Matt 22:15. From that time forth began Jesus to show unto his disciples how that he must go unto Jerusalem, and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and be raised again the third day. Matt 16:21. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false witness against Jesus, to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. Matt 26:59-60. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priests, and said unto them, What will ye give me, and I will deliver him unto you? And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. Matt 26:14-15. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself, and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. Matt 27:3-4. Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh thither with lanterns and torches and weapons. John 18:3. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. John 18:10. And they that had laid hold on Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. Matt 26:57. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, He hath spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now ye have heard his blasphemy. What think ye? They answered and said, He is guilty of death. Matt 26:65-66. Then the band and the captain and officers of the Jews took Jesus, and bound him, and led him away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas, which was the high priest that same year. John 18:12-13. Likewise also the chief priests mocking him, with the scribes and elders, said, He saved others, himself he cannot save. Matt. 27:41-42. Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. Pilate, what hast thou done? If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. And when Pilate had said this, he went out again unto the Jews, and saith unto them, I find in him no fault at all. John 18:35-36-38. When the chief priests therefore and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto them, Take ye him, and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. John 19:6-7-12. Chief priests and Pharisees came together to Pilate, saying, Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the third day. Matt. 28:64. And when they were assembled with the elders and had taken counsel, they gave large money unto the soldiers, saying, Say ye, his disciples came by night, and stole him away while we slept. So they took the money, and did as they were taught, and this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day. Matt. 28:12-15. Jesus exposed a corrupt and evil conspiracy of the Jewish leaders. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! Because ye build the tombs of the prophets, and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous, and say, If we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Wherefore ye be witnesses unto yourselves, that ye are the children of them which killed the prophets. Matt. 23:29-31. The very people who had been opposed to the prophets had now become Jewish leaders. They wanted those high positions in order to be seen of men, and to occupy the uppermost rooms at feasts, and the chief seats in the synagogues. Matt. 23:5-6. They enjoyed being in charge of the temple and taking care of the temple money. Those who had fought against the true prophets had now become the false prophets. Such secret conspiracies were also evident in the life of Joseph Smith. Less than a year after the church was restored, the Lord revealed to the prophet, And now I show unto you a mystery, a thing which is hid in secret chambers, to bring to pass even your destruction in process of time, and ye knew it not. D&C 38:13. The fulfillment of this prophecy took several years, but when Joseph ran for U.S. president, extreme measures were taken to kill him. Almost all true prophets meet with similar persecution and even death, because they expose these vipers and hypocrites. In our effort to determine the real guilty party or parties in the death of Jesus Christ, let's re-evaluate the evidence, the testimony of the witnesses, and the history in relation to this murder case. The closing arguments could well be: 1. It was not the system alone that caused the crucifixion of Christ, since their systems were run by people, they did not run themselves. 2. It was not the Roman leaders who charged Jesus with treason, as they said they found no fault with him. 3. It was not all the Jews that were trying to kill Jesus, as many Jews were Christians and suffered persecution and death as well. 4. It was not even all the Jewish leaders that wanted to kill Jesus, because many of them believed in him and his gospel as well. 5. In the case of the crucifixion of Christ, it was not what killed him but who. No court or jury ever closed a murder case because they discovered what killed someone. 6. There were only a certain few who were guilty of buying and bringing false evidence into the trial. It had been reported that the money used was from the temple funds. 7. Since there was insufficient legal evidence to convict Jesus, certain individuals going beyond the limits of the law were actually responsible for the murder themselves. 8. Both Roman and Jewish law was breached by certain individuals in order to get a conviction. 9. Persecution against Jesus came from a certain pocket in the Jewish community who were responsible for false evidence, secret meetings, disobedience to the law, and inciting riots, threats, and murder. 10. This small group of people was responsible for stirring up masses of people against Jesus, for threatening the Romans if they did not kill him, and also for threatening others who believed in or followed Jesus. Even associating with this apostate was grounds for excommunication. 11. It was to this small group that Jesus directed his criticisms and condemnations. 12. These people were the main ones to benefit from the death of Christ. 13. Thus, from all the evidence and testimony, Christ's death was a conspiracy. Public propaganda was brought against Jesus, and hired lawyers gathered evidence against him. This group of Jewish leaders personally led the charge to accomplish the crucifixion of Christ. Now let's take a closer look at defending the Jewish people as a whole. 1. Even among the chief rulers of the Jews there were those who accepted Jesus as the Messiah. 2. Among the general public were many who became Christians, some of them even becoming apostles, 70s, and other officers of his church and kingdom. 3. Many of the Jews saw miracles and accepted Jesus because of them, and some were even healed by him. 4. Many Jews accepted Jesus as the Christ, but did not openly admit it because of threats by certain leaders. 5. Jesus actually labeled the wicked as coming from amongst the Pharisees, Sadducees, elders, high priests, and scribes. 6. He rebuked them as the ones who served the devil, who killed the prophets and would kill his followers. 7. These were the men who continued to persecute, excommunicate, and kill the converted Jews. 8. Christ foretold the fate that would befall the Jewish nation, because so many of them were blinded by their leaders and followed them, even though they were partially convinced that Jesus was led by God. Similar atrocities that happened leading up to the crucifixion of Christ have occurred whenever mankind has been involved in conspiracy. Regarding these secret conspiracies, the prophet Moroni stated, "It hath been made known unto me that they are had among all people." Ether 8:20. Furthermore, he said they destroyed the Jaredite and Nephite nations, and if we were not careful, they would destroy the American nation. We are shown that they also destroyed the Jewish nation. Conspirators are still alive and well, and are working their mysterious plots and schemes to rule and reign. They may say they are Jews, and they may come from that lineage, but in reality they are no longer of the house of Israel. They are of the synagogue of Satan. They plan murder, they plot out and instigate wars, and they create depressions and inflations. Because of their actions, they no longer have the right to claim to be Jews or Israelites. It was these money changers that corrupted the temple with their business of making profit. God has forbidden these money systems, including usury. Usury, a reward for the use of money. Unlawful interest. Usury is the reserving and taking, or contracting to reserve and take, either directly or by indirection, a greater sum for the use of money than the lawful interest. Black's Law Dictionary, page 1192. Nevertheless, that corrupt money system will eventually fail, as the Lord told Joseph Smith. And again, verily I say unto you, let all my servants in the land of Kirtland remember the Lord their God, and mine house also, to keep and preserve it holy, and to overthrow the money changers in my known due time, saith the Lord. Even so. Amen. D&C 117:16. When a man like Judas turns betrayer, he betrays not only his religion, but also his people and his nation. As it was anciently, when people no longer serve the Lord, they serve another master, and similar curses result therefrom. When they no longer serve Israel, or their Lord, they no longer are the sons of God. They exchange one synagogue for another, one religion for another, and one God for another. Though they claim to be priests and elders, they actually become heathens and sinners. The rewards they would have received from the master called Jesus, they now qualify to receive from the master called Beelzebub. When Judas betrayed Jesus, he sinned against the light he once had. He knew Jesus was innocent and that he was the Messiah. But he sinned against his priesthood, betrayed his religion, and forsook his friends. He was at first called an apostle of God, but in his betrayal he became one of the apostles of the devil. Our master is the master we serve. We cannot claim one master and yet serve another. Those Jewish leaders who knew that Jesus was the Christ and conspired for his crucifixion also sinned against their priesthood. Regardless of their high positions in the church, they began serving the same master that Judas did. They, too, would be known as the sons of Satan. They serve the same master in life, and they will serve the same in death. When these high priests, scribes, and elders conspired against Jesus to put him to death, they exchanged their positions and their masters. Even though they held the same titles and even the same offices, their souls had been traded because of their deeds. The Lord said to the Apostle John, I know thy works, and tribulation, and poverty, but thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Rev. 2:9.